Zoroark EX gets a lot stronger with Ascended Heroes, but the thing is, Ascended Heroes is released only a few weeks before rotation, and after rotation, does Zoroark just die? Well, no, not exactly. Actually, Zoroark post-rotation is finding a stable place in the meta. In Japan, it's doing quite well, it's winning quite a bit. Sure, rotation did take away some of its best cards, such as Iono and Countercatcher, but the deck is doing really well, since a lot of these are newer cards, and Zoroark only actually rotates in 2 years. Sure, it does take a few bad matchups into the meta, such as Lucario, but most of the matchups are actually pretty strong. And honestly, Zoroark has found a very stable 60. If we take a look at the core, it looks pretty damn good. Pause. It's Harper straight from the back room, that's why I'm so yellow, but I just like to say, if you guys want to learn more about Zoroark in the current format, well, I have a guide about the deck. I will be leaving that guide link down below in the description. It really helps the channel. I don't have sponsors or anything like that, so the main way to support the channel is by going down below and supporting me through Medify. I do coaching, and also I have a lot of different guides on different decks, and I will be uploading a lot more guides in the future. So I really appreciate the support from every one of you. If you don't want to, then don't feel pressured, but otherwise, back to the video. Thank you so much. Well, I'm going to be showing you 3 Zoroark decks, and all 3 of them actually look fairly similar. All 3 are running the Unfair Stamp A-Spec, and that makes sense. Post-rotation Unfair Stamp is really strong due to the fact that there's not a lot of disruption in the format. Judge is the only real disruption card, but it's just not that good. Unfair Stamp is really good and can slow down a lot of decks, such as the aforementioned bad matchup being Lucario. So we've got the 4/4 Zoroark line, which is very standard in all Zoroark's decks, and then everything else is kind of like a mix-up. There is, in every single deck, a Zekrom, at least a 1/1 line of Darmanitan and Reshiram, and that does make sense. All of these are very strong attackers in very different scenarios. If you take a hit and survive, Reshiram will come in and you can swing for big damage with the powerful Rage. If you want to take out smaller Pokemon, you can use Darmanitan, which can deal 90 damage to 2 of your opponent's Pokemon, 1 in the active and 1 on the bench. And this is a good win con against a lot of decks, even like the Lucario. If your opponent has 2 Riolus, well, you can get them both out of there with the Darmanitan. So Darmanitan is a card that is really, really strong in the meta. Not only is it good pre-rotation into Goldengo, it's great post-rotation into basically any evolution deck. Then we've got Zekrom, which is obviously one of the strongest cards that Zoroark has to offer, due to its 250 damage output is very, very nice, and we can bump those numbers up with Binding Mochi and also Black Belt's Training, each dealing plus 40 damage since the base is 250. If we plus 1, it's 290. If we plus a second, it's 330, and this is a decent number to hit as you are one-shotting something like the Dragapult, and with just 10 more damage, you'll be one-shotting something like a Lucario, which is really cool, and that's where Monkey Dory comes in. If we have an energy on a Monkey Dory and we have damage on our board, well, we can move that damage over onto our opponent's Pokemon, which is quite nice. The problem is with Riolu as well, or Lucario as well, is that it actually needs energy to attack. It needs 2 of them, and they don't really have any energy acceleration other than the first attack of the Lucario. So if you're able to get into an attacking position before your opponent has any energy attached to their Riolus, well, you have at least 1 more turn to swing. So that is pretty good. Obviously, that matchup is just quite bad. But the thing is, if we take a look at the rest of the format, well, a lot of the format does kind of favor Zoroark. Zoroark looks pretty good into the format. Recently, we saw a bunch of pretty weird decks winning stuff like Mega Buffalant Kangaskhan. It just is not good, right? Sure, it's fine, but it's just not good into something like Zoroark, because if you ever attack into Zoroark, you just kind of lose on the spot, and Zoroark can deal enough damage to you to the point where you can't just constantly heal it off and get rid of all the damage with Monkey Dory. Since the deck is only playing 2 Monkey Dorys, it's just not going to be able to constantly heal all that damage, right? Dragapult itself inherently is just not a great matchup. Well, Dragapult kind of doesn't like finding Zoroark because it's not a great matchup for Dragapult, and that's a really big chunk of the meta. So Dragapult is just a decent matchup for Zoroark in general. Lucario is kind of like a toss-up of a matchup, and then the 3rd most popular deck in Japan right now is the Grimmsnarl, and Grimmsnarl is a pretty good matchup for the Zoroark, especially post-rotation, since they aren't playing Iono and can't Iono spam us. We can kind of get into a position where we have double Monkey Dory set up, and we're just a better attacker. We're able to one-shot them, whereas they are not able to one-shot us. And we'll see that Zoroark is actually winning quite a few events here and there. Another deck that's been doing pretty well is Slowking, but Slowking does kind of fold to the whole Darmanitan 90-90 thing. So yeah, Zoroark is looking pretty good into the post-rotation meta. Another deck that has been popping up a little bit more is the Zoroark, and Zoroark has a great matchup into Zoroark because they have to discard a lot of energy, and obviously, well, we can get rid of them with the Darmanitan attack. Speaking of the Darmanitan attack, let's take a look at the next list, which is playing a heavier 2-2 line of the Darmanitan. We'll also see that the core of these decks is obviously the Lily's Determination alongside the Cyrano. If we take a look at all three of these decks, they are all playing heavy amounts of Lilies and heavy amounts of Cyrano. That does make sense because Zoroark is a deck that does struggle in the early game to get set up, but once you get set up, Zoroark is a really strong deck. Nestball rotates, so we kind of substitute that with the Pokepad, which is a little bit unfortunate because you do want to Nestball sometimes for the Peckrunt or the Pheasant Dibbity, but the thing is, with having triple Cyrano quad Ultra Ball, you do have ways to find your Peckrunts, and the best thing about the Cyrano now is that you don't actually have to draw into it naturally, right? We have Meowth. Meowth is a great card, which, if you don't know what it does, once you bench it, you can switch your deck for a supporter. So it opens up a massive avenue of cards. So, for example, if we find a singular Ultra Ball, we can use that Ultra Ball to find our Meowth, and from there, Meowth can find us something like a Cypher Maniac's Code Breaking, which will put 2 cards on top of the deck, and let's say those 2 cards are the Unfair Stamp and a Zoroark. Then we can trade with one of our pre-existing Zoroarks, discarding something like a useless Buddy Puffin in the mid-game, drawing into our Unfair Stamp and a second Zoroark to get whatever we need, and then we can Unfair Stamp and just get going from there. So it is a very strong combo piece that all revolves around a singular Ultra Ball, so you will also see all of these decks playing heavy amounts of Ultra Ball. It's basically 3 or 4, and I kind of like the 4th Ultra Ball. I think Ultra Ball is just a way too strong of a card to have. If anything, I would cut one of these Pokepads and go down to a 3rd Pokepad and play the 4th Ultra Ball. I'm pretty sure that's what we saw this list doing, with the 4th Ultra Ball playing the 3rd Pokepad, and this one was playing 3 of each. So you can see it has a very strong core and a very good amount of searchability with the Cyrano and the Ultra Balls and the Pokepads and the Buddy Puffin. So it is definitely a much more consistent deck post-rotation because you just don't have those you don't have as many techs as you can slap into the deck. Techs that are worth noting are the Binding Mochi, like we said, for the damage. The Team Rocket's Watchtower is really good because of opponents' Meowths, which is important, and then also the Energy Switch. Energy Switch I really do like in these decks because you can just prep up a lot of attackers, and if you have an energy attached to something already, you can just move it onto, let's say, something like the Peckrunt, and Peckrunt itself is actually a pretty good closer. But speaking of Peckrunt, we've got a second Peckrunt in this deck. This is the Poison Peckrunt, which is the one that is, kind of synonymous with the Donk decks. Donk decks are rotating basically with rotation, because the Poison Tool and the Amoongus guy, Brute Bonnet, rotates as well. But Peckrunt is pretty cool because it traps your opponent, which is pretty cool, and also poisons them for 80. So it's actually 80 damage for 2 energy, and it's also a trap. And trap is really cool post-rotation because Turo rotates, Penny rotates, and those are 2 of the most common cards. Also Jet Energy rotates. Those are 3 of the most common cards that are really enjoyed by a lot of decks to not get trapped. For example, let's take a look at Charizard. Charizard is playing Jet Energy, right? Well, obviously Charizard rotates post-rotation, but you get the point. Dragapult itself was playing Turo, but it's not playing Turo anymore because it rotates. A lot of these big basic EX decks were playing Turo and Penny because, well, you don't want to get trapped, and also it heals stuff. So you can't do that anymore, so Peckrunt is actually a really cool inclusion that I really like in this deck. Badoo is also a great card into a lot of matchups to slow down the game, because Zoroark is a deck that kind of wants to be a little bit slower just so it can set up and then it gets aggressive. It kind of has 3 stages in the game. The first stage is the kind of setting up stage. This is the slowest stage, but definitely the most important stage, because if you don't get a good solid foundation in this stage, both of your next stages are going to be a little bit slower. The second stage being the aggro stage, right? This is where you kind of go hyper aggressive with your boss's orders, your Darmanitans, your Zekrom attacks, and you just want to chase prizes. And you've got stage 3, which is the checkmate stage. So this is kind of the stage where you've been using trade for a while, you've been able to thin out a lot of these worse cards, like, you know, you've gotten rid of the Buddy Puffins, you've gotten rid of the NPP ups, you've got energy attached to everything, and you're also setting up a checkmate. Like, you're getting into a position where you are going for that final turn, you're setting up attacker after attacker and making sure that you have multiple attackers, so even if they do KO the one, they can't deal with the next one, and you have enough boss's orders in the deck or something to make sure that you'll be able to find it. You'll be able to thin all these cards out of your deck and make sure that at the end of the game, your deck is maybe like 5 to 6 cards, and no matter what happens, you're able to draw through them all. With Pheasantipity, you have an Ultra Ball in there to find the Meowth, to find the boss, you have the boss itself in there. So it's just kind of getting to that last stage of the game where your opponent doesn't actually have outs to beat you anymore. And that is something that Zoroark is really good at. Due to having so many various attackers, it has a lot of options. Like, if they are trying to set up, let's say, a multi-prize turn, Reshiram can punish them for that, because if they try to set up multi-prize turns and leave damage on your board, 1, you have Monkey Dory to fling that damage over, and 2, if it's a lot of damage, Reshiram can punish them by doubling that damage and putting it onto your opponent's active Pokemon. So it is really, really strong, and if they try to attack with a 1-prizer, well, then you've got Flame Body Cannon, which can obviously deal with 2 1-prizers, which is really strong. So it's kind of like a very difficult chess game with Zoroark, because you have so many moving pieces and so many ways that you can actually set up the checkmate. Binding Mochi is one of those things that also is really, really strong, but since you are only usually playing 1 of them, I know the other lists are playing 2, or this list is playing 2, and this list is playing 1. I kind of like 1. I think 1 is perfectly fine, and I honestly think recently I've been going down to a singular Zekrom. I don't think you need that many Zekrom. I think the more important card in the deck is actually Darmanitan. Darmanitan gives you so much value in the beginning of the game, and it can just punish your opponents. Like, if they have a slower start whatsoever, you can completely punish them with a Darmanitan. And that's why I think out of, like, these lists, this list is probably my favorite. This list is probably the list I would be playing going into the next format. I think I would probably not play this Pekarund. I would probably be playing the Yveltal. I think Yveltal honestly has a really, really, really good place in this deck. With the Pekarund, you're able to switch into that Yveltal. It has free retreat, number 1, and number 2, it has a high amount of HP, 110, so it can trap stuff and get damage onto the board. For example, since it has 110 damage, it can trap something like a Zoroark, put 20 damage onto that Zoroark. It can put 10 damage onto itself with poison. Right, it'll take another 20 damage from the poison itself, so it'll essentially put itself down to 90, but since it's on 90 HP, it doesn't die to the Zoroark, which did 70 damage, which is nice, right? And then you have damage to move around. You can free retreat that Pokemon, and then for the rest of the game, you have damage to move around with the Monkey Dory. If anything, I would probably say a second Monkey Dory is probably pretty fine. I would say it's pretty good into the meta, because obviously against Dragapult, Monkey Dory is really, really strong. Against all these other Frostlass decks that are in the format right now, it is really, really strong. And also, if you could be playing Yveltal, it is quite nice to just be able to make sure you have Monkey Dory set up, and you don't have to use something like your Night Stretcher, because obviously Night Stretchers are very valuable in this deck, and if your Monkey Dory dies, well, you have to Night Stretch for it back, and that's 50% of your Night Stretchers just being used for a Monkey Dory. And a lot of times you will be using your Night Stretchers to bring back something like your Zekrom or like your Reshiram. And remember, Super Rod rotates, so Night Stretcher is the only really good way to make sure you have access to stuff from the discard pile. So that is something else that we're kind of losing for Zoroark. But that is kind of my thoughts on post-rotation Zoroark and the lists that I kind of do like. But yeah, if you enjoyed, smash like, smash subscribe, and yeah, thanks for watching.